All right, lesson 8.3. We're going to be factoring today using greatest common factors like we did yesterday. They do look a little bit different today. So today we have 4 terms in each of these examples, and we're going to be factoring out the GCF, but we're going to be grouping first. So keyword for today, today's different from yesterday because we're going to start with grouping. Let's take a look at problem number 1. When you factor by grouping, what you want to do is you just are going to create 2 groups. You're going to create a group out of the first 2 and a group out of the second 2. Let's rewrite those here. So I've got an x squared plus 2x group, and I've got an x plus 2 group. All right, so when we're grouping now, we're going to find the GCF for each of these. So for this one right here, I'm going to say, okay, what is the GCF for just x squared plus 2x? Well, I have a 1 in front here. Remember our saying 1, you're done? So if you've got a 1 for a coefficient, then 1 is your GCF, right, which we don't even need to write. Both of these do have an x value, which means that my GCF has x in it. Then I've got an x squared here, but not an x squared here, so I cannot use x squared. So just my GCF is just x. X is in both terms. Now remember, when we find our GCF, it goes outside of our parentheses. All right, our GCF goes outside of our parentheses. And then we've got it looking like this. And then to figure out what goes inside, we just divide out the greatest common factor. Right? So we just divide out the x. Or some of you can just kind of figure it out based on what you would put there and foiling. We talked about that yesterday. Okay, so x squared divided by x. Remember our exponents get subtracted and we're left with just x, or x to the first power. Now 2x divided by x, the x's cancel out entirely and we're just left with a positive 2. All right, and I meant to do those in blue. Here we go, we got x plus 2. All right, let's take a look at our next set. We've got x plus 2 over here. So what is my GCF for x plus 2? Let's see. Well, I don't have x's in both, so I can't use x. And I've got a 1 for my coefficient and 1 you're done. Okay, so literally all I have is a 1. There's no other greatest common factor because 2 only has 2 and 1 also. So just 1 is my GCF. So 1 is going to go outside, and I'm going to have my parentheses still. And then we're going to divide everything by 1, which, I mean, doesn't change anything, but we can still write it out. So if I get x divided by 1, I still just have x. 2 divided by 1 is still just a positive 2. All right, so we're almost done, you guys. Take a look. Please, please, please notice that both of these have x plus 2. That has to happen. If that doesn't happen, you did something wrong. Go back and check your work. We should always end up with matching quantities with the same stuff in the parentheses. And that is one of my groups, right? So x plus 2 is one of my groups. I have another group, though. I'll put that right here. Any idea what it is? My other group is what I had on the outside. Those of you who prefer the double distributive foiling method, this might look familiar, right? My outside terms create a group. And what sign was this? It was just a positive one, so I'm going to put a plus. This is my final answer. This is my factored form. All right, now it says to check using the FOIL method. I'm going to check using the calculator method, all right, because I think that's foolproof and just really super simple. So let's go to y equals. We're going to clear out whatever's in there, and I'm going to put in what I started with. So I started with those 4 terms. I had x squared plus 2x, and then I had plus x and plus 2. So plus x and plus 2. All right, now my next one is what I'm putting in what I think the answer is. So in this case, that's going to be x plus 1 and x plus 2 with parentheses and everything. If you guys will recall, before we were doing this lesson, we were putting these in kind of backwards. So we've been doing this process frontwards and backwards. Let's see if these are the same. Let's go to our table. Okay, see how my y column, both the numbers in my y columns are matching up? Okay, that means I did these correctly, right? They are producing the same y values, so I know that I'm right. Okay, now we're going to be checking all different methods. My first method is just calculator method because I always like to do that if I can. Problem 2, here we go. Problem 2, here we go. So first thing we do for factoring by grouping, right, if you get 4 terms, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to create 2 groups. So my first group is 6y squared minus 4y. And my next group is 3y minus 2. And then I just focus on one at a time. All right, what is my GCF for this first group? Well, I've got a 6 and a 4. I can divide both of those by 2. So I've got a 2, and then I've got a y in both, right? This has y and this has y. So, don't have y squared. Yep, that's it. Okay, so 2y is my GCF. So let's go ahead and let's write 2y on the outside of my parentheses. And I just need to now figure out what's left over. And I do that by dividing out the GCF, right? We're dividing out the 2y. So what do I get? Well, 6 divided by 2 is 3. And y squared divided by y is just y, right? What about the next one? Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. And the y's cancel. Perfect. All right, we're done with the first group. Let's look at the second group. We had 3y minus 2. First things first, we're going to identify our GCF. And our GCF, let's see here. 3 and a 2 don't have any common factors, so I'm just going to put a 1. And then y here and no y's here mean I can't use y, which means, yeah, 1 is it. That's my GCF, just like the first problem. So I'm going to put a 1 outside parentheses. And I'm going to figure out what's left over. And again, with a 1, it's real simple because when I divide out a 1, nothing changes. So, still left with 3y minus 2. Okay, do you remember what you're looking for at this point? Do you remember that this and this should be matching? If it's not matching, something's wrong. All right, and we do have matching quantities there, which is perfect. So one of my groups is 3y minus 2. My other group is, do we remember? The outside terms, right? The greatest common factors make up a group. So my other group is going to be a 2y, and this was a positive 1, so plus 1. Okay, so that is my answer. All right, now we're going to check our answer. This time we are going to use the foiling method. All right, so let's go ahead and let's draw this out. We're checking that 2y plus 1 times 3y minus 2 gives us back our original. So let's see. Well, 2y times 3y is 6y squared. And 2y times negative 2 is negative 4y. 1 times 3 is positive 3y. And finally, 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. Is this what I started with? 6 minus 4, positive 3. Yep. Okay, so I know that I'm right. Let's look at the next problem. Here we go. All right, first things first, do we remember? Create 2 groups. So we got this group and we got this group. If the negative is right there, make sure you include it, okay? So my first group is 12a squared plus 3a. My next group is negative 8a minus 2. All right, this is a really easy mistake to make. Make sure you keep the negative in your group. Let's focus on the first one. Here we go. So my GCF is, let's see, 12 and 3. Both of those can be divided by 3. And they both have a, but they don't both have a squared. So I just have to stick with a. So everything, let's see, 3a goes on the outside. And then we got to figure out what to put inside the parentheses. And remember, we figure out the leftovers by dividing. So everything is divided by 3a. So 12 divided by 3, we get 4. And a squared divided by a is just a. Next, our a's cancel. Also, our 3's cancel. So what do we put right here? make sure that you put a positive 1. All right, if everything cancels, well, we just have 3a divided by 3a. That's just 1. Okay, also think about it this way. That'll give me 12a squared, then I'll get 3a. If I didn't have the 1 there, I wouldn't get it back. It wouldn't work. Okay, let's look at the next group. Negative 8a minus 2. Here we go. My GCF. I got an 8 and a 2. All right, great. They can both be divided by 2, so 2 is my GCF. You know what, though? Did we remember from yesterday? If my front term is negative, my GCF has to be negative. Y'all, if you don't use a negative 2, it's not going to work. Okay, if my front term is negative, I have to use a negative. So my negative 2 goes in front of my parentheses. And I have to figure out what's left over. Remember, we do this with division. So divide out the negative 2. All right, 8 divided by negative 2 is a positive 4. And then we just have a. Right, positive 4, and then we just have a. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is a positive 1. All right, what are we checking for? We are checking to make sure that this group matches this group, and they do match up, so we're happy, and that is one of our final groups, 4a plus 1. But what about my other group? I need 2 groups. Do we remember? My outside terms. So a 3a and a minus 2. So my final answer is all these 2 groups together. All right, we're going to check using FOIL method one more time. Here we go. So let's write this out. We're going to write out our answer that we just got, 3a minus 2 times 4a plus 1. And we're just checking. 3a times 4a is 12a squared. 3a times 1 is positive 3a. Now we start with the negative 2. Negative 2 times 4a is negative 8a. And finally, negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. All right, do these 4 terms match these 4 terms? Let's check. 12a, positive 3, negative 8, negative. Yep, we're good. So that means we did it correctly and we can move on. Last but not least, okay, this one they throw some double variable problems at us. That's okay. We can handle it. Let's start with making 2 groups. All right, so we're going to start. Let's write them out. We got 4m squared plus 4mn. It's my first group. My next group is 3mn plus 3n squared. Now, to help you not get confused, y'all just try and look at one at a time here. Okay, let's see. GCF for this first one. 4 and 4 in both, so I got a 4 for a GCF. This has m squared and this has m, so I do have m's in both, but I have an n here and no n here, so I can't use n. So my GCF is 4m. All right, that goes outside my parentheses. And to figure out what's left over, we're going to divide by that 4m. Okay, the 4's cancel, and we are left with just 1, which we don't even really need to write 1. Okay, what about m squared divided by m? M squared divided by m is just m. If you write the 1, that's fine, but I'm not going to. Okay, finally, the 4's cancel, the m's cancel, and we're left with positive n. Okay, let's look at the next group here. We got 3mn plus 3n squared. So we need to first find our GCF, and it is 3 and 3, so my GCF is positive 3. And then I have an m here, but no m's there, so I can't use m. I do have n's in both, but not more than one n, so I can just use n by itself here. All right, so 3n is my GCF, and that goes outside of some parentheses. All right, to figure out the leftovers, just like the last 3 problems, we're going to divide by the GCF, so we're dividing by 3n. My 3's cancel, and my n's cancel, so I'm left with m, plus my 3's cancel, and then n squared divided by n is just n to the first power, which is just n. All right, there we go. We're checking to see if what's in the parentheses matches, and it totally does, so we're very happy, right? This matches up with this, and that makes one of my groups. So m plus n is a group. My other group are these outside terms. right? So my red numbers, my GCFs make up my other group 4m and a positive 3n. And that right there is my final answer. Perfect. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have us check using box because I have a lot of my kids who prefer the box method. And so remember, guys, if we're doing a box method, we would take this right here and we would put everything on the sides. So I've got a 4m and a 3n and an m and an n. So if I do multiply, this would be 4m squared, check. This would be 3m n, okay, check, that was one of them. This would be m n, check. And finally, 3n times n would be 3n squared. Okay, check. So these four terms match the four terms I started with, which means that I did it correctly. All right, you guys, remember to summarize this process, make two groups, factor out the GCF for each group, and then write your factored form using your matching group and your outside number group. Okay? Remember that when you're factoring, you can always check your answer by distributing what you end up with.